At the southernmost edge of our planet, where the known world dissolves into blinding white lies, a land that feels almost alien. A place so immense it rivals the size of Europe, yet remains buried beneath miles of ancient ice, silent, untouched, and impossibly remote. Antarctica. To look upon it from the sky is to see a world that seems disconnected from our own. A blank expanse cut off from history, wrapped in cold so deep it erases sound itself. When early explorers drew the first maps of the world, they often left the far south empty. That blankness wasn't an omission, it was deliberate, like a space waiting to be filled, or perhaps kept secret. Even now, centuries later, the continent retains an aura of controlled mystery. The information that does emerge, the photos, the research, the official reports, always feels carefully chosen. No civilization ever called it home. No flag truly claims it. And even today, few who venture there ever speak of everything they've witnessed. Strangely, in a world that fights over every inch of land and every drop of oil, Antarctica stands apart, protected, untouchable. In 1959, a global treaty placed the entire continent beyond conquest. 48 nations, some bitter rivals, at the height of the Cold War, agreed to set aside their competition and preserve this frozen wilderness for peaceful scientific cooperation. It was a rare act of unity and one that raised unsettling questions. Why would humanity, a species built on possession and control, suddenly agree to leave an entire continent alone? What lies beneath its ice that compels the world to maintain such silence? To understand this paradox, we have to go back long before the treaty, before the first ship reached its shores, to the centuries when Antarctica existed only in myth. For much of history, the southernmost part of the globe was a canvas for imagination. Ancient philosophers believed that the Earth required a great landmass at its base to balance the continents of the North. It wasn't just geometry, it was cosmology, a belief that the planet itself had to remain symmetrical, like a scale held in nature's hand. The Greeks called this unseen world Terra Australis Incognita, the unknown southern land. The roots of that idea can be traced to early thinkers, like Pythagoras, who described the Earth as a sphere suspended in space. To keep it from tipping, he imagined a counterweight, a vast southern continent. Later Roman scholars like Claudius Ptolemy drew it into their maps as a continuous land stretching from the edge of Africa toward Asia. It wasn't placed there because anyone had seen it. It existed because they believed it must. And that belief transcended cultures. In ancient Chinese texts, there are references to a southern region called Nanzhou, a distant land of strange climate and fertile soil, existing far beyond the known seas. Though likely mythic, it echoed the same obsession that haunted other civilizations, the conviction that something immense and mysterious waited beyond the horizon. As the medieval world took shape, mapmakers in Europe continued the tradition. Their Mappae Mundi often included the great southern land shaded boldly across the parchment. Sometimes they filled it with drawings of monsters or fantastic beasts, not as decoration, but as a way to populate the unknown. The further explorers pushed outward, the larger Terra Australis seemed to grow in their minds, a promise of riches and revelation just beyond reach. By the 15th and 16th centuries, during the Age of Exploration, this imagined continent became an obsession. The Portuguese, the Spanish, the Dutch, and the English all chased its phantom shores. They believed that whoever found Terra Australis would not only redraw the map, but perhaps redefine humanity's place in creation. Instead, their voyages brought them to fragments, the southern tips of continents, chains of icy islands, pieces of the puzzle mistaken for the whole. Terra del Fuego, New Zealand, Tasmania. Each discovery was heralded as proof that the myth must be real. But the true continent remained hidden far to the south, veiled by storm and sea. Even before a human foot ever touched Antarctica, whispers of its presence had already entered folklore. Polynesian navigators, among the greatest seafarers in history, spoke of a land where the waters grew cold and mist rolled endlessly, a realm of perpetual ice at the world's edge. In South America, Incan legends told of pale visitors who came from a frozen realm far to the south, only to vanish again into the sea. None of these tales carried solid evidence, yet their persistence fascinated later scholars. Could fragments of ancestral memory, echoes from a time when Earth's climate was warmer, or sea routes extended farther south, have survived in story form? As European maps grew more accurate, Terra Australis did not disappear. Instead, it expanded, sketched as a sweeping mass circling the lower half of the world, stretching from Africa to South America. On paper, it became the foundation upon which the planet rested, a literal counterweight to everything above. Only when expeditions ventured closer to the polar latitudes did they realize the scale had been imagined too large, the outline mostly fiction. Still, the myth endured. Well into the 18th century, the lure of the southern land continued to drive explorers into perilous waters. Ship after ship sailed into the unknown, chasing a ghost that refused to be caught. Some vanished without trace. Others returned battered by ice, haunted by glimpses of vast white cliffs rising from fog. Those fleeting visions only deepened the obsession. The edge of the earth remained unfinished, and human curiosity abhors a blank space. In the end, Terra Australis Incognita was not just a geographical error. It was a reflection of something deeper, our need to believe that the world is balanced, that the unseen mirrors the seen. Humanity imagined a continent because it could not accept emptiness, and that idea, born from symmetry and speculation, became the spark for some of the most dangerous voyages ever undertaken. Many would die in pursuit of this illusion, but their failures peeled back the first layers of truth. Beneath the myth, there was indeed a real continent, vast, frozen, and silent, a place that had waited since the dawn of time for human eyes to find it. And when they finally did, the world would never see the edges of its own map the same way again. As the myths of Terra Australis Incognita began to fade, the dream of discovery hardened into obsession. The 18th and 19th centuries became an age of daring exploration, an era when wooden ships challenged oceans that seemed intent on swallowing them whole. What had once been a ghost drawn on parchment was now a frontier that demanded proof. And for those who dared to seek it, the price would often be their lives. By then, the great European powers had turned their eyes southward, driven by pride, science, and the hunger for glory. The British Navy, unmatched on the seas, led many of the earliest expeditions. Among them stood Captain James Cook, a man who pushed farther into the unknown than any before him. In the 1770s, his ship sliced through ice-choked waters, crossing the invisible boundary of the Antarctic Circle for the first time in human history. What he saw astonished even him, a horizon filled with floating mountains of ice, an endless white wilderness stretching beyond imagination. Cook never set foot on the continent itself, but what he recorded in his journals changed the world's understanding forever. The southern regions were not just open ocean, as some had believed. Beneath the shifting ice, there was solid ground, a massive landmass hidden under layers of frozen time. And though Cook declared the region not worth the discovery, barren, lifeless, and commercially useless, his dismissal only added fuel to the ambitions of those who followed. What kind of place could inspire both wonder and rejection in the same breath? By the dawn of the 20th century, exploration had evolved into a race one not only of science, but of national identity. To reach the South Pole was to touch the very end of the earth, to claim a piece of eternity for one's country. Flags, pride, and human endurance became the currency of conquest. Among the names written into that icy chronicle, three stand. Above all others, Roald Amundsen of Norway, Robert Falcon, Scott of Britain, and Ernest Shackleton, also British, each carrying the same dream, though destined for very different fates. Amundsen was the strategist. Meticulous and unassuming, he studied the survival techniques of the Inuit, learning how to move with the cold rather than fight it. His team relied on dog sleds and discipline, cutting every ounce of weight, calculating every mile. Scott, by contrast, represented the spirit of empire, bold, proud, and convinced that modern machinery would prove mankind's superiority over nature. He brought ponies and motor sledges to the world's harshest climate technology that froze and failed long before reaching the pole. And then there was Shackleton, the dreamer, who would come to embody something far more powerful than victory. The race to the pole unfolded like a tragedy written in advance. In December of 1911, Amundsen and his men reached the South Pole, first planting the Norwegian flag in the snow and quietly recording the achievement. Weeks later, Scott's party arrived, exhausted and heartbroken, only to find their rival's marker standing against the wind. Their return journey turned catastrophic. Trapped by blizzards and running out of supplies, they perished one after another. Scott's final diary entries, found months later, spoke not of regret, but of dignity and loss. "For God's sake, look after our people," he wrote, a sentence that would echo through generations. His failure became legend, a testament to the price of ambition and the fragility of human endurance in the face of nature's indifference. Then came Shackleton, the man who never reached the pole, yet became immortal for something even rarer, saving every one of his men when survival seemed impossible. In 1914, his ship Endurance became trapped in pack ice crushed slowly by forces greater than any storm. For months, his crew drifted on ice floes, battered by wind and hunger. When hope was nearly gone, Shackleton led a handful of men across 800 miles of freezing ocean in a small, open boat reaching South Georgia Island. From there, he organized a rescue mission that brought them all home alive. He returned without conquest, but with something far deeper proof that leadership and courage could outlast despair itself. Through these stories of triumph and tragedy, Antarctica transformed from a blank patch on the map into a living chapter of the human story. What had once been myth became memory, and yet the brutal conditions faced by these explorers revealed a contradiction at the heart of humanity's quest. We could reach the edge of the Earth, but we could not master it. The continent resisted possession. It remained untouched, as though the planet itself guarded a secret no flag could claim. As the early 20th century unfolded, exploration gave way to investigation. The age of heroes turned into the age of science. Expeditions returned not just with stories, but with samples, rocks, fossils, cores of ancient ice. Geologists drilled deep into the frozen ground, unearthing sediments that spoke of a startling truth. Antarctica was not always frozen. Beneath the ice lay evidence of forests, petrified wood, fossilized ferns, even traces of pollen. Once, millions of years ago, this land had basked in sunlight, home to rivers, valleys, and green life. Over time, shifting continents dragged it southward until it became a monument to extinction and endurance all at once. To scientists, those discoveries rewrote the history of the planet. To others, they hinted at something more mysterious, the possibility that Antarctica's transformation was not only geological, but perhaps cyclical, part of a pattern the Earth had repeated many times before. What could have lived here when the world was young? What civilizations, if any, might have known its shape before the ice returned? The more explorers learned, the deeper the mystery grew. Every answer uncovered a new question. Radar surveys revealed mountain ranges buried beneath miles of ice. Strange magnetic anomalies were detected near the pole. And as the glaciers shifted, the continent began to whisper clues of its deeper past, a past not entirely silent. By the early decades of the 20th century, Antarctica had become a mirror reflecting both human brilliance and human limitation. It was proof of how far we could go and how much we still didn't understand. In its endless white expanse, explorers found not conquest but humility. It reminded the world that even in an age of machines and empires, there remained places beyond control, and that perhaps some secrets of the Earth were meant to stay buried a little longer. Yet the race for knowledge was far from over. As nations turned their eyes once more toward the icy South, now armed not with compasses and sails, but with science, ambition, and power, a new kind of struggle began. One not for discovery, but for control. Antarctica was not always a kingdom of ice. Long before its surface turned to glass, it was a living world, warm, green, and filled with life. Scientists now know that millions of years ago, before the Great Freeze, this land was covered in forests and rivers, its soil rich and alive. Fossils of towering trees, thick beds of coal, and leaves pressed into rock tell the story of a climate that once rivaled modern jungles. Some trunks still show perfect rings, proof that they grew through long summers and short, bright winters when the sun barely set. These clues leave no room for fantasy, only awe. Here in a place now ruled by silence, dinosaurs once roamed through valleys of moss and fern. Giant plant eaters grazed under endless daylight. Predators adapted to months of darkness stalked through the shadows. The ground beneath Antarctica's glaciers holds evidence of a world completely unlike the one we know, a world that forces science to ask the hardest question: what could have turned paradise into a tomb of ice? Most geologists agree that the answer lies in movement, not of weather, but of continents. Over eons, tectonic forces dragged the southern landmass toward the pole. Once Antarctica drifted far enough, the surrounding ocean formed a barrier of cold currents, cutting it off from the warmth of the equator. The Antarctic Circumpolar Current, a ring of freezing water that circles the continent, sealed its fate. From that moment, the ice began to grow, not all at once, but in waves, freezing and retreating through ages. What makes this story stranger is that the transformation wasn't smooth or final. Fossilized plants show signs of warmer periods even after Antarctica reached its polar position. Some layers reveal forests that grew between long winters of snow. It suggests that Earth's climate didn't simply cool, it pulsed. Heat and cold traded places like the planet breathing through millennia. What caused these sudden swings remains a mystery. Were they natural cycles, shifts in orbit, or signs of something still beyond our understanding? Today, beneath ice that can reach 3 miles thick, radar scans reveal shapes that should not exist: buried mountains, frozen valleys, even what appears to be the remains of ancient forests sealed beneath time. If these are ever uncovered, they may rewrite our understanding of life's resilience and of how this planet has adapted to catastrophe before. But Antarctica's ice holds more than fossils. It holds memory. Deep ice cores extracted from the continent contain tiny bubbles of air, real fragments of ancient atmosphere trapped for hundreds of thousands of years. Inside those frozen samples, scientists read the record of Earth's breath, carbon levels rising and falling, the rhythm of warm ages and glacial winters repeating in slow, steady cycles. When carbon dioxide rose, the planet warmed. When it fell, the ice advanced again. The pattern is the heartbeat of the planet itself. Within those layers lie not just air, but dust blown from distant deserts, ash from volcanoes, and pollen from vanished plants. Together, they form the most complete timeline of Earth's climate ever discovered, a library written in ice. Yet that same ice both preserves and conceals. To reach the deeper chapters, we must drill through barriers older than our species. Every meter reveals another page, but millions of years still remain unread. Perhaps that is why scientists often describe Antarctica as a locked archive. Inside are the records of our planet's past, sealed and waiting. But it is a library that demands patience and humility. To read it, one must move slowly without arrogance and accept that nature reveals its truths only to those who listen. In the endless hush of this continent, it almost feels as though the Earth itself is whispering, "I remember." While modern research confirms that Antarctica has been entombed in ice for millions of years, one artifact continues to defy that certainty: the Piri Reis map drawn in 1513 by an Ottoman admiral whose knowledge far exceeded his age. The parchment is astonishing not just for its artistry, but for what it appears to show: the outline of a southern landmass, strikingly similar to Antarctica, and most puzzling of all, drawn without ice. Piri Reis was no mythic figure. He was a skilled navigator and a meticulous scholar who claimed his chart was compiled from more than 20 earlier sources, Greek, Arabic, and even some said to predate Columbus. In the lower section of his map lies a coastline that mirrors the shape of Antarctica's hidden shore, as revealed by radar in the 20th century. The resemblance is unnerving: mountains, bays, and curves nearly identical to the subglacial terrain we know today. How could a 16th century admiral have charted a land buried beneath 2 miles of ice, a continent no human had yet seen? Some historians argue that Piri Reis merely misassembled fragments of South America, creating an illusion of the Antarctic coast. Yet when geographers overlay his map with modern surveys, certain details align too closely to dismiss as coincidence. Others suggest that his work may preserve knowledge from older civilizations, remnants of maps drawn when Antarctica was still ice-free. If true, it would mean that humanity once possessed maritime technology and geographical understanding far beyond what recorded history allows. Mainstream scholars remain cautious, preferring to see the resemblance as chance or as evidence that Antarctica's ice cover may have retreated temporarily in the distant past. But the alignment continues to provoke wonder. How could so much precision come from so far back in time? And the Piri Reis map is not unique. Other charts from the 16th and 17th centuries also depict a vast southern continent, sometimes joined to South America, sometimes separate. The shadow of Terra Australis lingered in human imagination long before explorers confirmed it. Could these old maps be the scattered echoes of a lost cartographic tradition? Fragments of knowledge passed down through forgotten ages until they reached the admiral's hands? For centuries, scholars have debated that question. To traditional historians, the Piri Reis map remains an anomaly, an uncomfortable outlier that refuses to fit neatly within accepted timelines. To others, it stands as evidence of something more, perhaps an echo of civilizations erased by time, whose understanding of the world has only barely survived in ink and myth. Whatever the answer, the map continues to tempt imagination. It is less a relic than a riddle, a doorway between science and legend. And through that doorway, Antarctica transforms once again. No longer just a frozen wilderness, it becomes a memory, a vault that might still guard the story of an ancient world lying silent beneath the ice. Today, when we look at satellite images of the continent, a massive white expanse adrift in the southern seas, it's hard to believe that it was once part of a much larger whole. Yet geology tells us it was. Antarctica was once joined to Africa, South America, India, and Australia in a supercontinent scientists call Gondwana. Imagine Earth some 180 million years ago. The continents we know had not yet broken apart. Instead of scattered islands and oceans, two colossal landmasses dominated the globe, Gondwana in the south and Laurasia in the north. Antarctica sat nearer the equator, then linked to warm, fertile regions teeming with life. Rivers flowed across its plains. Forests stretched from what is now Africa all the way to the southern horizon. Traces of that ancient unity still remain. The Transantarctic Mountains share the same rock structures as ranges in South Africa and India. Coal seams, iron deposits, and volcanic stones found beneath Antarctic ice match those in Australia and Brazil. These geological twins act like fingerprints, proving that the continents once fit together as parts of the same body. When the Earth's plates began to shift, Gondwana broke apart piece by piece. India tore away and raced north to form the Himalayas. South America and Africa drifted west and east, their coastlines still curving toward each other like the edges of a broken vase. Eventually, Antarctica slid to the bottom of the world and became fully isolated, its separation sealed when the Antarctic Circumpolar Current formed about 34 million years ago, wrapping it in an endless ring of cold water. From that moment, its long winter truly began. One fossil above all proves this connection: Glossopteris, a fern that once blanketed the forests of Gondwana. Its remains have been discovered in India, Australia, South Africa, and deep beneath Antarctic stone. Like a living signature written across the continents, it reminds us that the world was once one, and that the ice which now divides us is only the latest chapter in a much older story. The fossils uncovered across Antarctica gave scientists of the 19th century the final evidence they needed to embrace a once ridiculed idea: continents move. The theory of continental drift, first dismissed as fantasy, suddenly made sense. How else could identical plant fossils, the same ancient ferns found in India, Africa, and Australia, also lie frozen beneath the Antarctic ice? Glossopteris became proof written in the stone that the world was once one. Gondwana was no longer myth, it was the Earth's memory of unity. That revelation changed how humanity saw its planet. The continents were not immovable. They drifted, collided, and broke apart like rafts in an endless sea. Antarctica's present isolation is only a pause in a much longer dance of separation. Once it was joined to lands now filled with life, part of a single body before the planet's restless crust pulled it away. Recent studies of the bedrock beneath the ice deepen that story. Using seismic scans and radar, scientists have mapped mountain chains buried under kilometers of frozen weight, along with vast fault lines and mineral belts that mirror those on other continents. The resources formed during Gondwana's age did not vanish. They remain trapped below, sealed away like treasure inside a vault of ice. In that sense, today's Antarctica is only a chapter one of silence, not extinction, in Earth's grand narrative of change. But while Gondwana connects Antarctica to the planet's deep past, modern discoveries reveal another world hidden within it, a living one. Beneath miles of solid ice lies a network of subglacial rivers and lakes that has remained sealed for millions of years. The largest and most studied of these is Lake Vostok. Buried under more than 4 kilometers of ice, it rivals the great freshwater lakes of the northern hemisphere in size. For at least 15 million years, it has been completely cut off from the atmosphere. Whatever survives inside has evolved in total isolation, untouched by sunlight or surface air. When Russian scientists finally drilled through the ice and brought up the first samples, they found traces of microbial life unknown to science: organisms adapted to darkness, pressure, and chemical energy rather than light. To biologists, it was as if they had reached another planet. The extreme conditions resembled what we imagine beneath the icy crusts of Jupiter's moon Europa or Saturn's moon Enceladus. Vostok became more than a lake. It became a time capsule, and a mirror for our search for life beyond Earth. And Vostok is not alone. Radar imaging has revealed hundreds of other lakes beneath the ice connected by flowing rivers that stretch for hundreds of kilometers. These hidden waterways carry minerals, sediments, and microorganisms through the frozen underworld, proving that Antarctica is not a dead continent, but a dynamic system still pulsing beneath the cold. If life can persist, they're cut off from sunlight and the wider biosphere for millions of years, then perhaps life could exist in many places once thought impossible. Still, where science ends, imagination begins. If entire ecosystems can survive beneath the ice, might there be something more than microbes down there? Some believe these sealed chambers could harbor complex organisms or even remnants of a civilization lost to time. Mainstream researchers reject such notions, yet curiosity grows whenever strange radar reflections hint at unusual geometric structures under the surface. What is certain is that these subglacial worlds act as Earth's memory vaults. They preserve the atmosphere, climate, and biology of ages past, untouched, pristine, and irreplaceable. That purity makes Antarctica both sacred and controversial. Certain regions are declared strictly off-limits, not because we lack the technology to explore them, but because even the smallest disturbance could erase records millions of years old. From a scientific perspective, such protection is logical. But secrecy breeds speculation. Each restriction invites new theories about what might truly lie hidden there. The less we are allowed to see, the more we imagine. Antarctica has therefore become more than a subject of study. It has become a mirror for myth. While researchers examine ancient air trapped in ice cores, others see in its endless white a reflection of forgotten legends, the echo of Atlantis, the fall of lost gods, the entrance to a hidden world below. When people hear of the underground lakes and ancient microbes sealed beneath the continent, their minds take one more step. If so much remains unseen, could this place itself be the origin of the greatest legend of all, the vanished civilization of Atlantis? During the 20th century, that idea found its boldest advocate in the American scholar Charles Hapgood. Rather than relying only on old maps, Hapgood proposed something far more radical: that Earth's crust might once have shifted, suddenly sliding entire continents across the globe in a geological heartbeat. In that violent motion, he argued a thriving civilization could have been displaced to the pole and buried beneath ice. He called it the theory of Earth crust displacement. Unlike Alfred Wegener's gradual model of continental drift, Hapgood envisioned the planet's outer shell gliding as a single piece over the molten mantle beneath. Such a shift, if it occurred, could move continents thousands of kilometers in a geological instant, transforming a mild region into a frozen wasteland. In his 1966 book, Maps of the Ancient Sea, King's Hapgood proposed that the fabled Atlantis was not swallowed by the sea but entombed beneath what we now call Antarctica. Around 12,000 years ago, he suggested the crust shifted and the continent slid south, freezing whatever civilization had flourished there, and leaving only myths scattered across cultures as its obituary. The idea ignited controversy, but also fascination. Some writers noted that similar myths of a lost southern land appear from Polynesia to South America to the Mediterranean stories of radiant kingdoms that vanished into colder sea. The end of the last ice age, when global sea levels rose sharply, added plausibility to the timing. Even Albert Einstein, in a preface to one of Hapgood's works, wrote that the theory deserved attention for its originality. He did not endorse it as fact, but his measured curiosity gave it legitimacy in the public eye. Geologists eventually rejected the concept, pointing out that the slow motion of tectonic plates explained continental drift without invoking sudden catastrophic shifts. Yet Hapgood's vision refused to fade. It captured something deeper than data, the haunting thought that entire chapters of human history might have been erased by forces of the Earth itself. Could civilizations have risen and fallen, leaving behind only whispers? In that sense, Antarctica became more than a landscape. It became a symbol of forgetting, of deep time, of worlds buried beneath silence. Whether Hapgood's Atlantis lies under its ice or only in our imagination, his theory reminds us of how fragile memory is and how easily truth can be entombed by time. It crossed cultures, from the myths of the Andes to the songs of Polynesia and the tales of the Mediterranean. There persists a shared echo, a memory of a southern world radiant yet unreachable, that disappeared beyond the horizon. Perhaps those stories are only metaphors for loss. Or perhaps they are the faint recollection of something real, a civilization swallowed by the cold, waiting beneath the ice for the world to remember. Is it coincidence or the last shards of memory about a continent sealed away by ice? In the Andes, Inca traditions speak of pale visitors who came from the far south, figures emerging from a world of frost, remembered as bearers of knowledge. They were said to have taught fields and stone farming and building, and then vanished after a calamity nobody could name. At the cold tip of South America, stories among Patagonian peoples told of giants skin like winter light, towering to twice a person's height. When European sailors reached those shores in the 16th century, they recorded similar tales. Some even claimed to glimpse immense shapes along the coast, a moment when rumor and reality seemed to touch. Skeptics argue these were exaggerations after meetings with taller outsiders. Yet many of these legends predate the Europeans, which keeps the question alive. Perhaps those giants of ice were metaphors for glaciers and polar winds. Or perhaps they were blurred recollections of encounters with groups long gone, leaving only myth behind. Across the Pacific, the master navigators of Polynesia carried stories of Hawaii, a sacred southern homeland, origin place, and resting place, a realm that existed and then was lost. Scholars usually read Hawaii as a cultural idea more than a map coordinate, but set beside Inca memories and Patagonian giants, the echoes feel too aligned to ignore. Even around the Mediterranean, where Plato wrote of Atlantis, geographers like Ptolemy and Strabo speculated about a great southern land needed to balance the world. Medieval mapmakers shaded it boldly across their parchments, proof that both East and West were haunted by a place no one had seen. Across many traditions, messengers from the South, giants or beings from a threshold world, were not enemies so much as semi-divine teachers who stirred wonder and fear. The pattern mirrors the Atlantis motif, an advanced realm destroyed, leaving faint traces behind. In human culture, giants often mark a remembered former age, the Titans of Greece, the Nephilim of Scripture, the colossal figures of Polynesian lore. They belong to an earlier world cleared away so ours could begin. Read together South America, Oceania, the Mediterranean. These strands make Antarctica look like a stage where collective memory converges. The value of such myths may not be literal accuracy, but their uncanny harmony, distant cultures, recalling a southern land, unreachable and lost. That shared imagination has turned Antarctica from a lifeless block of ice into a living symbol of awe, dread, and the human need to go farther. It gives no final answer but opens the door to the real question. Beneath the ice, could echoes of a vanished age still remain? From legend to the present, satellites now circle the globe, and the internet puts Antarctica on every screen. The continent is no longer a rumor. It is a visible canvas. And yet, paradoxically, the more images we gather, the deeper the riddles seem to grow. Amid millions of photographs, odd shapes appear, and a familiar debate follows. Do these patterns hint at structures, or are light, shadow, and ice deceiving us? One image became infamous, the so-called Antarctic Pyramid. In certain satellite views, a peak rises from the white, with sharp lines, triangular faces, and a striking summit. From a distance, it looks engineered, as if carved by human hands or something older. Speculation spread fast: Atlantis survivors, visitors from elsewhere, or a secret facility hiding in plain sight. Scientists offered a simpler frame. They pointed to a nunatak, a rock summit poking through the ice, weathered into triangular symmetry over vast time. The effect, they said, is pareidolia. The brain imposes familiar forms on randomness, just as we find faces in clouds. Reason did not slow the wildfire. Edited and recaptioned the images, became a digital legend. Videos about the pyramid gathered views by the millions, repeating familiar questions. Why silence from officials? Why can no one visit? Ironically, the fewer answers available, the larger the myth grew, and the pyramid was not alone. Other scenes showed dark slashes that resembled tunnels, rectangular shadows like cut doors in the ice, or openings that seemed to lead below. Some were later tied to natural shadows or processing artifacts. For those convinced Antarctica hides secrets, the anomalies became exhibits, entrances, corridors, foundations of something unknown. The power of such pictures does not depend on being correct. It depends on the curiosity they ignite. Because Antarctica is difficult to reach and carefully regulated, any anomaly invites narrative. A stain becomes a gateway. A peak becomes an ancient form. The bigger question lingers: are we misreading ambiguous pixels, or is something deliberately concealed? Science can offer likely explanations, but it cannot extinguish the hunger to believe there is more. In that gap between what data explains and what people hope for, modern legends find their life. From wind-carved peaks that look like monuments, imagination takes another step. If the images hint at hidden spaces, could the continent be a doorway to an inner world? Stories gather around names like Hollow Earth and Agartha. The Hollow Earth idea first appeared in early modern Europe, with thinkers sketching a planet made of nested shells and open caverns within. Over time, it drifted from science into myth. Antarctica became the perfect curtain for such tales, remote enough to hide a secret, vast enough to make anything plausible. The legend of Agartha describes a hidden realm beneath the surface, a city of wisdom, perhaps an entire civilization, existing alongside humanity but unseen. In some Eastern traditions, from Hindu cosmology to Tibetan teachings, there are motifs of subterranean sanctuaries where knowledge and longevity are preserved. Folded into the polar imagination, those motifs fed the belief that portals to Agartha might exist near the poles. The story fused inevitably with the name of Admiral Richard Byrd, the American aviator who flew over both poles. Documents circulated presented as his secret diary, claiming he saw a green land beyond the ice, a strange inner light, and creatures unknown. Historians view these texts as apocryphal. Still, they anchored Hollow Earth firmly in Antarctic lore. Between fact and story, one truth remains: Antarctica is a perfect stage for underground myths. Miles of ice caves, no one has entered, flight restriction zones kept undisturbed together, they create the feeling of a veil. For believers, the louder the denials, the stronger the conviction becomes. Hollow Earth and Agartha may be myths, but they echo something real: humanity's refusal to accept that every secret has already been solved. We want an unexplored land, a hidden doorway, a reason to keep searching. In its cold hush, Antarctica has become the emblem of that need. From here, the narrative moves into a different century. Myth gives way to geopolitics. The frozen South stops being only a canvas for imagination and becomes a stage for power. As the great powers of the 20th century carved up the globe, Antarctica ceased to be a forgotten corner of the map. It became a pawn in a larger game, a territory wrapped not only in snow, but in secrecy. Beneath the frozen silence, ambition and paranoia collided. The myths of hidden worlds began to blur with the politics of empires, and the first to stir that mix was a regime whose name still echoes with unease: Nazi Germany. In 1938, the Third Reich launched an Antarctic expedition under the command of the German Navy. The ship Schwabenland sailed south with planes, cameras, and orders to chart an unexplored stretch of ice. The mission's official purpose sounded harmless enough to locate new whaling grounds and secure supplies of whale oil, then vital for fuel and industry. But the operation's scale and the secrecy that surrounded it suggested another agenda. Over several months, German aircraft flew thousands of miles, dropping flags across a region of Queen Maud Land they named Neuschwabenland, New Swabia. Thousands of photographs were taken, maps drawn, and coordinates recorded with military precision. On paper, it was a scientific journey. In practice, it looked like a claim, one more step in Hitler's campaign to extend German presence across the world. When the war ended, the records of that voyage remained fragmentary. That vacuum predictably filled with speculation. Some believed the Nazis had built more than survey camps. Rumors told of underground complexes hollowed from the ice, experimental weapons labs, even flying disc technology years ahead of its time. Others suggested they had discovered something extraordinary beneath the glaciers, the remains of an ancient civilization, or perhaps an entrance to the inner Earth itself. The lack of clear evidence only fueled the mystery. After 1945, stories circulated that senior officers in U-boats had escaped to the southern seas, vanishing toward hidden bases. Historians reject these tales as fantasy. They note there is no credible proof of Nazi strongholds in Antarctica, only the remnants of a propaganda mission meant to showcase power. Yet the legend endured, fed by the Third Reich's documented fascination with the occult, with lost continents, with the myth of Atlantis. New Swabia, they say, was less a military outpost than a stage upon which ideology projected its own frozen utopia. Still, silence invites imagination. Many wartime documents about the expedition stayed classified for decades, and the absence of closure left questions hanging. If it was merely a whaling survey, why the enduring secrecy? Why do accounts of Nazi Antarctic bases continue to surface decades after the war's end? The most provocative question of all arrived with the next great event, an operation of unprecedented scale that would bring the world's most powerful navy back to the South Pole. Only 1 year after World War II, the United States launched Operation High Jump, one of the largest military expeditions in peacetime history. Officially, it was described as a test of logistics and survival in extreme cold. Unofficially, its size suggested more than training. From August 1946 to February 1947, a fleet of 13 ships, 33 aircraft, and nearly 5,000 men, including aircraft carriers, destroyers, and submarines, sailed for Antarctica under the command of Admiral Richard E. Byrd, one of America's most decorated explorers. For a land supposedly barren and useless, it was a staggering commitment of resources. The stated objectives were routine test cold weather gear, train, personnel, map uncharted areas. But the mission's sudden end raised eyebrows. Planned for 8 months, it was terminated after less than 2. Official reports blamed the extreme climate equipment failures and logistics. Yet to many that explanation felt thin. Why would such a powerful fleet capable of war retreat so abruptly? Out of that gap in knowledge grew a new generation of theories. Some claimed High Jump was secretly tasked with locating a hidden Nazi base beneath the ice, where remnants of the Reich and its scientists had fled. Others suggested the fleet encountered advanced technology aircraft or weapons of unknown origin, forcing a hasty withdrawal. The tale spread quickly, helped by quotes attributed to Admiral Byrd himself. In a South American newspaper interview, he was said to have warned that the United States must prepare for attacks by flying objects capable of crossing from pole to pole at incredible speed. Though no official transcript has ever confirmed those remarks, they became immortalized in rumors shaping the mythology of what Byrd really saw. Mainstream historians, however, paint a different picture. They argue High Jump was part of America's broader effort to demonstrate global reach after the war, a Cold War rehearsal under the guise of research. Antarctica's strategic location made it a testing ground for long-range flight and radar operations. The abrupt withdrawal, they say, was simple pragmatism. Antarctica's ferocity broke men and machines faster than expected. No enemy fired a shot. Nature itself won. Yet the shadows around High Jump refused to fade. The magnitude of the operation, Byrd's mysterious comments, and the continued classification of certain reports keep the door open for speculation. For believers, the story became a bridge connecting Nazi myths to modern mysteries, proof that something extraordinary lay beneath the southern ice, something governments dared not reveal. Admiral Byrd's legend deepened the intrigue. As one of the first aviators to fly over both poles, he had seen vistas no other human had witnessed, vast stretches of unrecorded land, odd atmospheric glows, magnetic anomalies that disrupted instruments. Then came the infamous secret diary. In later decades, a manuscript appeared claiming to be Byrd's own account of a flight into a green inner world beyond the ice inhabited by advanced beings. The U.S. Navy denied its authenticity. Historians dismissed it as invention. Still, to the public imagination, it felt believable, not because it was proven, but because it fit perfectly into Antarctica's mythology of forbidden realms. Between truth and legend, one fact remains: Admiral Byrd's words, real or imagined, reshaped how people saw Antarctica. No longer just a continent of storms and stone, it became a frontier of mystery, a place where history, myth, and power intersect. His alleged warning about a vast land beyond the pole has endured for generations, echoing the same question that haunted explorers for centuries: what lies past the edge of the known world? Some modern researchers argue that Admiral Byrd's mysterious remarks were never meant to describe an entrance to another world. They believe he was speaking only of still unmapped stretches of the Antarctic coast, places where the ice had retreated enough to reveal the dry valleys, rare pockets of exposed ground. His warning about flying craft moving from pole to pole may have been a metaphor for new military technology emerging in the early Cold War era. Yet ambiguity is a powerful thing. Bird's words, filtered through dramatic newspaper headlines, took on a life of their own. Within months, they became fuel for stories about secret worlds beneath the ice. Whether his comments were misunderstood, mistranslated, or deliberately exaggerated, they transformed him from an explorer into a mythic figure, a reluctant herald of the hollow earth of Agartha, of civilizations lost beneath the South Pole. We may never know exactly what he meant, but it was the vagueness itself that made his legacy immortal. In the years that followed, Antarctica stepped quietly out of the age of adventure and into something entirely new, an age of diplomacy and global politics. The most extraordinary proof of that change came in 1959 with the birth of the Antarctic Treaty, a pact so unusual that historians still call it one of the strangest miracles of the 20th century. The 1950s were the years when the world seemed ready to tear itself apart. The United States and the Soviet Union clashed on every front: arms races, nuclear tests, ideological wars, the first launches into space. And yet in the middle of that hostility, a rare truce appeared. Both superpowers, along with 10 other nations, agreed that the southernmost continent would belong to no one. On December 1st, 1959 in Washington, D.C., 12 countries signed the Antarctic Treaty: the U.S., USSR, UK, France, Japan, Australia, Norway, Argentina, Chile, Belgium, South Africa, and New Zealand. The document's language was deceptively simple. Antarctica would be used only for peaceful purposes. All military activity was banned. Scientific research would be encouraged and its results shared freely. No nuclear explosions, no storage of radioactive waste. Existing territorial claims would be frozen, new claims forbidden. In a world obsessed with possession, an entire continent was suddenly declared off limits. That astonishing cooperation puzzled observers then and still does now. Why would nations that fought over every inch of land suddenly surrender one twice the size of Australia? Some historians say the answer is practical. Antarctica is too harsh, too remote, too expensive to conquer. Why bleed budgets for frozen rock? But others suspect that reason alone cannot explain the unity. To them, the treaty's harmony feels rehearsed, as if the major powers already knew there were things under the ice better left untouched. Those suspicions only grew once people read the fine print. Any expedition research team or mapping project requires special authorization. Vast regions were closed under the label of environmental protection. Commercial flights were banned. Even scientists are confined to approved corridors and must report their movements. For defenders of the treaty, this ensures safety and conservation. For skeptics, it looks like deliberate control. The notion of hidden truths quickly replaced the old tales of lost continents. By the 1960s, entire communities of theorists were arguing that the treaty's real purpose was to suppress discoveries that could rewrite history, archaeological ruins, buried structures, or the remnants of wartime installations. Others claimed it was a joint cover-up between Cold War superpowers to conceal military experiments or even evidence of extraterrestrial contact. No proof ever surfaced, yet the strictness of the rules seemed to invite imagination. Over the decades, the Antarctic Treaty System has grown, expanded, and endured. More than 60 years later, it still stands now, joined by over 50 nations. On paper, it remains one of humanity's greatest diplomatic successes: no war, no armies, no borders. And yet, paradoxically, that very perfection fuels suspicion. Absolute peace feels unnatural on a planet defined by conflict. What if this calm is not peace but silence? A silence carefully negotiated and maintained. Look closer at the maps and another curiosity emerges. Scattered across the white expanse are restricted zones, areas where travel is limited or completely prohibited. If Antarctica is truly a sanctuary for open science, why are there places no one may go? Commercial aircraft rarely, if ever, cross the continent. International routes curve around the southern oceans, around South America, South Africa, or Australia, but never slice directly over the pole. Aviation authorities cite the dangers: extreme cold magnetic interference, no emergency airfields. Engineers counter that modern planes can handle all of it. So why, in an age of technology, does the most mapped continent remain a blind spot in the sky? The same mystery shadows satellite imagery. Certain coordinates appear blurred or missing. Officially, this is an artifact of data stitching or low-angle capture. But for online investigators, each patch of distortion becomes proof of censorship. Across the continent, so-called no-fly corridors snake between mountain ranges and ice shelves. They are said to protect fragile ecosystems, yet to the public they appear as barriers hiding something immense. Popular theories fill the blanks. Some insist those zones conceal remnants of Nazi bases. Others point to geometric patterns beneath the ice interpreted as ancient structures. Still others whisper about ongoing weapons research carried out in violation of the treaty itself. Occasionally, a satellite photo slips through a dark circular depression, resembling an entrance, a cluster of sharp-edged ridges, and before officials can clarify the images, vanish from public databases. To believers, the deletions prove everything. To skeptics, they prove only how fast rumors travel. Even scientists sometimes feed the myth unintentionally. Several expeditions in the 20th century were reportedly ordered to turn back near specific coordinates, citing weather or safety. A few researchers later admitted that portions of their data were withheld. Each omission becomes another spark for the imagination. Is environmental preservation merely the official story, while greater discoveries remain buried? Antarctica, in this view, is a half-assembled puzzle. The pieces we can see are precise and orderly, while the missing fragments invite endless speculation. And it is those missing fragments, the empty corridors on maps, the air routes that never cross the pixels, that never load, that give the continent its modern mythology. They are the voids into which every theory is poured. Antarctica has become the mirror of our collective doubt. We stare into its blankness and see whatever truth we most want to find. When the treaty was first signed, many imagined Antarctica as a realm of pure science, a quiet network of climate stations and laboratories. But the deeper the Cold War went, the more the ice became a silent stage for rivalry. Hidden beneath talk of peace, the two superpowers used the continent as an invisible listening post. With its position at the planet's axis, touching both the South Atlantic and the South Pacific, Antarctica offered a strategic vantage for tracking missiles, submarines, and satellite paths. Officially, the new installations studied geology, meteorology, and biology. Unofficially, observers saw something else: fortified bunkers, radio towers, and radar domes rising from the snow. Were these truly weather stations, or the eyes and ears of global surveillance? By the 1960s and 1970s, dozens of international research facilities dotted the ice, their antennas aimed not just at the heavens but at one another. Antarctica had become the quietest battlefield of the modern age, a place where science and secrecy blended so perfectly that no one could tell where one ended and the other began. The spirit of cooperation that surrounded the Antarctic Treaty often looked to critics more like a mask than a miracle. Behind the flags of science and peace, quiet rivalries continued to unfold. Reports circulated that the United States had deployed sonar arrays beneath the Southern Ocean to trace Soviet submarines slipping through the frigid depths. At the same time, Soviet engineers were rumored to have installed satellite tracking systems within their icy outposts, listening for American transmissions from orbit. To the public press, photos showed smiling scientists in bright parkas exchanging samples and handshakes. But beneath the surface, a silent contest of surveillance was underway. The continent had become the perfect theater for covert monitoring: no civilians, no witnesses, and a treaty that guaranteed secrecy under the name of science. Persistent rumors spoke of vast underground facilities carved directly into the ice. Whispers claimed that both superpowers had tunneled below building research bunkers, weapons depots, and command centers. Some explorers even described cavernous passages large enough for vehicles to pass through networks hidden under miles of snow. Official agencies dismissed these stories, yet structures like the Amundsen-Scott Station proved that large-scale construction beneath the surface was entirely possible. The existence of those bases kept imaginations alive. Adding to the intrigue were the no-fly zones that began appearing on maps during the height of the Cold War. Officials explained them as environmental safeguards meant to protect sensitive ecosystems or reduce noise near nesting grounds. But skeptics noticed that many of those restricted areas sat directly above major research bases or near geological regions of interest. To them, the alignment was too perfect to be coincidence. If the treaty forbade militarization, why were these areas so heavily shielded from view? By the 1980s, the global arms race was reaching its climax. Lasers, particle beams, and directed energy weapons filled defense budgets. In Washington, the Strategic Defense Initiative, the so-called Star Wars program, promised a new era of technological supremacy. Some theorists began to link Antarctica to the secret research, suggesting that its isolation made it the ideal testing ground. In a land with no press, no population, and weather capable of erasing every trace, a failed experiment could vanish overnight. If true, the continent was not a scientific outpost, but a laboratory for hidden ambitions, a Cold War frontier where technology met myth. The image of peaceful laboratories collecting weather data began to crack. What lay beneath those white domes and satellite dishes? Could the hum of generators and radar arrays be tracking more than storms? To outsiders, the strict silence surrounding these operations transformed Antarctica into a black box, a continent of unanswered questions sealed by both ice and bureaucracy. Even after the Cold War melted away, that black box was never opened. The secrecy endured layered like the ice itself. And on top of the old political mysteries came new ones, mysteries written in light, not paper. In the skies above Antarctica, witnesses began reporting strange phenomena that blurred the line between science and the supernatural. Pilots flying near the southern pole told of luminous objects streaking across the horizon, moving faster than any known aircraft. Some appeared in groups weaving in formation before shooting upward and vanishing into the thin polar atmosphere. These accounts rarely reached the public but circulated quietly among military and research circles. For UFO believers, Antarctica became the ultimate hidden stage, a place where the heavens met the ice beyond scrutiny, beyond reach. Even scientists stationed at the Amundsen Scott base noted phenomena that defied easy explanation. They described halos of light lingering for hours, silvery beams, unlike the typical green glow of auroras. On rare nights, a deep humming accompanied the display, a sound that seemed to come from the sky itself. Officials called them unusual atmospheric events, but the phrasing only deepened curiosity. The most famous incident dates back to 1965 when a group of Argentine pilots reported encountering bright orange lights near the Antarctic Peninsula. The objects darted across the sky at impossible speed before rising vertically and disappearing. Newspapers across South America picked up the story, and to this day it remains one of Antarctica's best-known UFO cases. What gave such accounts weight was the reliability of the witnesses, trained aviators and researchers, not casual onlookers. In a region where every flight is logged and monitored, mistaken identity seemed unlikely. Still, official silence followed. Were the reports classified for national security reasons or quietly dismissed to avoid panic? Scientists offered natural explanations, reflections on ice, rare optical mirages, experimental aircraft. Yet none of these accounted for the speed or the deliberate motion described by observers. In a sky with no civilian traffic, who or what was moving up there? For conspiracy theorists, the answer lay closer to Earth. They claimed Antarctica served as a proving ground for secret aerospace programs, disc-shaped craft inspired by wartime research, tested far from the public eye. When pilots glimpsed them, officials simply labeled the sightings unknown lights, hiding innovation behind mystery. Whether alien or human, the phenomena kept Antarctica's reputation alive as a crossroads between worlds. While the skies drew eyes upward, the ice itself began revealing new wonders and new fears. The frozen continent, once thought eternal, is changing. In only a few decades, satellite records have shown glaciers cracking shelves, collapsing, and icebergs the size of cities drifting out to sea. Each fracture is both a warning and a revelation. Beneath retreating ice lie valleys, sediments, and entire landscapes sealed since prehistory. Every season of thaw exposes another page from Earth's buried past, grains of pollen, fragments of leaves, even fossilized insects preserved in the permafrost. These are reminders that Antarctica was once lush and warm, part of the great supercontinent Gondwana. Some layers even hold the remains of marine creatures, proof that these frozen plains were once coastal forests in shallow seas. The most extraordinary finds are the subglacial lakes. Radar mapping has uncovered hundreds of them, vast bodies of liquid water trapped beneath kilometers of ice. The largest Lake Vostok may have been isolated for 15 million years. Scientists dream of finding unique life forms there, Organisms evolved entirely apart from the rest of the biosphere. As the ice melts and technology improves, these hidden lakes edge closer to reach. Each new discovery widens the imagination. If microbes have survived in that eternal dark, could larger organisms endure as well? And what about the strange geometric patterns seen in satellite scans? Straight ridges and grid-like formations deep beneath the surface. Geologists explain them as tectonic fractures or bedrock faults. Others insist their precision hints at something artificial, remnants of structures too old to name. Climate change thus becomes both threat and key, a force destroying and revealing at once. The melting ice exposes secrets long buried, but every revelation seems to vanish behind new barriers of classification. Research data is sealed, images blurred, findings summarized in vague language. To many, it feels as if Antarctica's thaw is uncovering not only the planet's past, but knowledge too dangerous or disruptive to share. And so the paradox deepens. The more the ice recedes, the less the world seems to know. What lies beneath the last untouched continent, fossils, technology, or something stranger, may soon be exposed not by explorers but by the planet itself. Yet even as Antarctica melts, its silence remains unbroken. The frozen vault opens, but the secrets stay locked within. It is as if a vast curtain is slowly being pulled aside, and behind it lies not only the forgotten history of our planet, but truths humanity may not yet be ready to confront. The question today is no longer simply how fast is the ice melting, but what will we see once it's gone? Yet not everything revealed by the Antarctic thaw comes from nature. Alongside the discoveries unearthed by time and climate are mysteries of a different kind, mysteries involving people, disappearances, lost expeditions, flights that vanish into static, questions that have never found an ending. In the 19th century, explorers perished because they lacked the technology to survive. But in the 20th and 21st centuries, when satellites circle above and communication networks span the globe, how do people still vanish without a trace? Some of the most unsettling cases involve aircraft. Throughout the 1960s and 1970s, both military and civilian pilots reported strange phenomena while flying near the pole. A few aircraft disappeared from radar, completely their signals, dropping to silence within seconds. Despite exhaustive search efforts involving fleets of ships and planes, no wreckage was found. Harsh weather could explain much of it: the katabatic winds, whiteout storms, the endless fractures of moving ice. But in several reports, communications failed without warning, as if an unseen interference had swallowed every signal. To some, that sounded less like weather and more like technology, electromagnetic disturbances perhaps, or jamming from hidden installations. And the mystery didn't end with the skies. Ground expeditions have their own chilling entries in the record. One research team left a coastal station for a routine survey and never returned. Days later, rescuers found half-erected tents, scattered instruments, and long drag marks in the snow, as if the crew had fled in terror. The official report blamed a storm, but those details echoed another case halfway around the world: the Dyatlov Pass incident of 1959, still one of history's most unnerving mysteries. There are darker stories still. At certain bases, scientists were said to have gone out to inspect equipment and vanished within sight of safety. Some disappeared just a few hundred yards from their station. Helicopters scoured the area for days, finding nothing. No footprints beyond a certain point, no sign of a fall or struggle. It was as if the white itself had opened up and taken them. Strangely, these incidents rarely made international headlines. When they did, the reports were short, clinical, and quickly buried beneath newer news. Official explanations pointed to the continent's merciless conditions: sudden temperature drops, hidden crevasses, the lethal cold that can kill in minutes. But for those drawn to the shadows, the pattern felt too deliberate. In several instances, radar logs and radio transcripts vanished alongside the victims. To skeptics, this suggested not natural tragedy, but managed silence. Perhaps they said these people had stumbled across something they were not meant to see, and their disappearance ensured that secrets stayed buried. Antarctica's very nature makes such theories irresistible. In a place defined by isolation and silence, almost anything can happen unseen. The vanishing of a few lives becomes a metaphor for the vanishing of truth itself, a white abyss that swallows evidence as easily as it swallows men. And still the question lingers: what could be hidden so important that human lives are worth its concealment? If these were only accidents, why do records and communications vanish with them? If they were ordinary tragedies, why the urgency to close each file? While those stories of vanished explorers haunt the ice, another truth lies buried beneath a truth made of stone and metal. Antarctica holds staggering wealth below its frozen surface. Beneath the miles-thick ice sheet lie vast deposits of coal oil, natural gas, and minerals, the kind of resources that could rewrite the balance of global power. Geological studies since the mid-20th century have confirmed that Antarctica's coal seams date back to a time when the continent was blanketed with forests. But coal is only the beginning. With the rise of deep penetrating radar and seismic scanning, scientists uncovered signs of enormous oil and gas reserves, fields so extensive that some estimates compare them to those of the Middle East or Siberia. Alongside them lie veins of copper, iron, gold, and uranium, and perhaps most critically in our modern age, deposits of rare earth elements. These minerals are the lifeblood of technology, the heart of batteries, smartphones, satellites, and advanced weapon systems. In a century powered by microchips and magnets, whoever controls these elements controls the future. Yet despite their potential value, all exploitation has been banned. The 1959 Antarctic Treaty and the 1991 Madrid Protocol locked the continent's resources behind an international moratorium. Officially, this was to preserve the fragile environment. And indeed, Antarctica's ecosystem is unlike any other. A single disturbance can echo for centuries. But viewed through a geopolitical lens, few believe that the world's superpowers would walk away from such treasure purely for altruism. Analysts often call the treaty a pause button rather than a peace pact to freeze on competition until the timing is right. Instead of rushing into open conflict, nations agreed to wait quietly, gathering data. Throughout the 1970s and 1980s, both the US and the Soviet Union conducted extensive geological surveys under the guise of research. Officially, they drilled for ice cores and sediment samples. Unofficially, they were mapping oil basins and mineral seams. Most of their findings never reached the public, but leaked summaries hinted at staggering numbers. In recent years, China has joined the race, investing heavily in Antarctic bases and deploying advanced underground scanning equipment. Its focus, analysts say, mirrors the Cold War programs of decades past: locate, record, and prepare. Because when the moratorium eventually expires, data will be the new weapon. Whoever holds the maps will hold the leverage. It is difficult then to see Antarctica as a simple realm of peace. More accurately, it is a locked vault, a continent-sized safe packed with resources, each superpower holding a different key and waiting for the right crisis to open it. When global energy reserves dwindle or the next great conflict demands new fuel, the pressure to unlock that vault will be immense. This economic undercurrent gives conspiracy theories their most tangible foundation. Maybe the secrecy, the no-fly zones, the restricted maps, and the diplomatic silence have less to do with ancient civilizations and more to do with geology. Some even claim small-scale extraction projects have already occurred in secret, their results classified to prevent diplomatic uproar. Oil and minerals are measurable, provable, and lucrative. They may well be the most concrete layer of Antarctica's mystery, the one that doesn't depend on myth to feel real. In a world addicted to energy and rare metals, control of the last untouched deposit on Earth could determine the next century's balance of power. And yet beneath the geopolitics and the science, another mystery persists, one centered not on the land, but on the people drawn to it. The frozen continent has hosted a surprising number of unusual visitors: world leaders, religious figures, and even astronauts. Each visit reignites speculation. What could possibly draw such powerful individuals to a place with no cities, no comfort, and officially nothing to see? The most talked about case came in 2016, when then U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry made a sudden trip to Antarctica on the very day of the American presidential election. The timing alone was enough to raise eyebrows. Why would one of Washington's most powerful men fly to the most desolate corner of the planet at such a pivotal moment? The official explanation was diplomatic, to witness climate change firsthand. But skeptics saw something else: a symbolic pilgrimage to the world's last forbidden frontier. A visit not just to study the Earth's future, but perhaps to glimpse the remnants of its past, the ones still sleeping beneath the ice. The silence around his itinerary and the many details that were never disclosed left John Kerry's 2016 visit wrapped in fog. The trip happened on the same day Americans went to the polls, and when he returned, almost nothing of substance was released. Years before another unexpected visitor had stepped onto the ice, Pope John Paul II. His presence was framed as a gesture of peace, a blessing offered to the most remote corner of creation. But symbols are mirrors. They reflect more than one meaning. Some said the Pope sought to witness an unsullied wilderness, a living testament to divine handiwork. Others whispered that the visit was a kind of spiritual stake in a land already claimed in practice, if not in law, by science and statecraft. From a religious vantage, Antarctica could be read as the last pure tabernacle, or as a landscape entangled with theological secrets never spoken aloud. Then came Buzz Aldrin, the moonwalker. He traveled south and abruptly departed with health complications. What made it stranger was a short, cryptic post, quickly deleted, warning, "We are all in danger. It is pure evil." No context, no further explanation. For a man who had looked back at Earth from the lunar surface, such words carried a chill. Did he see something in Antarctica the rest of us will never be told? The list of unusual visitors did not end there. Politicians, billionaires, senior military officers, their itineraries often compress their reasons. Thin or vague, have quietly arrived and departed. Some insist these are routine tours, photo ops, or climate briefings. Others suspect inspections, glimpses of fossils of staggering size, suspicious geometries beneath the ice, or technologies that rewrite boundaries. A darker reading imagines the continent as a private conference room for the world's power brokers, remote enough that no microphones linger, no chance encounters occur, no stray eyes intrude. Whatever the truth, their presence alone says something. Antarctica isn't empty. It holds layers of meaning, political, scientific, religious, and perhaps something beyond all three. The sharper question is not only what did they see, but why return to silence afterward. Sometimes the absence of explanation speaks louder than any press release. That quiet has become a greenhouse for speculation. Under the ice, a lost civilization, an artifact of impossible age, or more pragmatically, a vault of resources so vast that revealing them too soon could destabilize the world. Running through this entire story, through every expedition, every paper, every rumor, is a single theme: control of information. No other place on Earth is celebrated as a common heritage of humankind while being wrapped so tightly in rules about what may be shown and said. Data maps imagery, everything seems to pass through an invisible sieve. And it is that filtration which turns Antarctica into something singular, a place where power and secrecy walk together. Since the 1950s, nations pledged to keep the continent for peace and science. Alongside that pledge, they erected a lattice of legal walls. Research is permitted, even encouraged, but routed through formal channels. Independent publication is rare. Unilateral investigation is discouraged or denied. The effect is subtle but unmistakable. In Antarctica, knowledge is not just discovered, it is managed. Each release comes packaged in context trimmed to fit diplomatic comfort. To the broader public, this control shows up at the edges. Satellite tiles blur, maps linger in familiar zones, and leave other areas sparse. Full technical appendices are pending or restricted. Radargrams and deep core datasets that might reveal the subglacial world in high resolution seldom appear complete. The deeper one looks, the clearer the pattern becomes. This is not merely about safety, it is about narrative. Those who control the flow of Antarctic information also shape what Antarctica is in the human mind. If a major power declares that the continent is nothing but ice and microbes, that story hardens into truth, even if somewhere locked in a server room sits data that suggests more. In that gap between the public version and the sealed record, power thrives. And this is why Antarctica is so fertile a bed for conspiracy. The more that is hidden, the more the imagination rushes in. A blurred pixel becomes a bunker. A missing log becomes a cover-up. A lost expedition is no longer a storm. It is interference from something unnamed. Ironically, the gatekeeping meant to prevent wild theories often feeds them. Perhaps Antarctica illustrates a deeper paradox. Sometimes the most potent secret is not the content itself, but the message sent by the lock you are not permitted to know. One file withheld is less consequential than the system that withholds it. That system inflames curiosity, breeds suspicion, and ensures the myths endure. Beneath the politics of silence runs a far more combustible current energy. In a world devouring resources where oil fields, gas reserves, and rare minerals function as bargaining chips between states, a frozen continent filled with possibility cannot stay sacred forever. Geological records taken from the ice and the bedrock beneath point to ancient sediments, the fingerprints of coal oil and natural gas laid down when the land was warm and forested. Unofficial estimates, cautious in some circles, bold in others, compare potential reserves to the largest on Earth. As radar and seismic imaging sharpen, the subterranean map grows more detailed. The question is no longer if resources exist, but when and who will be allowed to touch them. For now, the Antarctic Treaty System and the Madrid Protocol hold the line. Exploration is science, exploitation is banned. But bans are not forever. In a future of strained supply and desperate demand, debates will shift from should we drill to who drills first. A silent race is already running, not with soldiers, but with surveys. Whoever stockpiles the best data, develops the safest rigs, and perfects transport in lethal cold will claim the advantage when the freeze on extraction thaws. And energy is only half the story. The other half is minerals, cobalt, lithium, rare earths, the skeleton of batteries, turbines, chips, and modern weapons. You can proclaim the age of green energy, but even a wind blade and a solar cell trace back to finite metals. If Antarctica's crust holds substantial deposits, it could become the last pristine mine and the most dangerous. Every borehole risks a cascade in a fragile system. Every pipeline invites a spill no storm can erase. Damage in Antarctica doesn't remain local. It propagates through oceans, climate, and coastlines. This is where morality and power collide. Great states could frame extraction as salvation, energy relief, food security, even climate mitigation through resource substitution. Environmental voices will warn that opening Antarctica is opening Pandora's box. The real weight of the continent emerges here. It is not a far-off curiosity. It is a hinge on which futures can swing. Once resources become prize and pretext, Antarctica ceases to be a sanctuary and becomes a chessboard. The next conflict may open not with missiles, but with memos, with treaties, tech, and the most persuasive story pitched to a weary world. Whoever convinces us that exploitation equals rescue will for a time prevail. Pull back and you see another pattern, the triangle of power gripping the curtain at the world's end. Science, the military, and religion. Three domains that appear opposed, yet touch at the pole. Science in principle is the lamp. It builds stations, runs transects, lowers drills, raises cores, and illuminates the ice. But in Antarctica, science is structured, budgeted, and bounded by international frameworks. Findings are routed, reviewed, and released in parts. The door opens, but only so wide. If science is the mask, the military is the steel beneath. Since the Cold War, the continent has been watched. Communication hubs, restricted corridors, and censored tiles hint at more than weather. Operations like High Jump and persistent stories of wartime remnants reinforce the belief that the superpowers never took their eyes or their instruments off the South. Officially, armaments are forbidden. Unofficially, no strategist forgets a land at the junction of three oceans under a canopy of satellite paths. Religion, the third point, seems an odd partner until you recall the Pope's visit in the language that followed. In the public imagination, faith grants Antarctica symbolism, the last pure land and altar of creation, a margin where mystery belongs. When statecraft and science cannot satisfy, myth fills the gap. The triangle doesn't merely coexist, it sustains itself. Science legitimizes management. The military guarantees control. Religion confers meaning, and at times blesses quiet. Together, they do not just preserve secrets, they make secrecy durable. Seen through that lens, Antarctica's hidden truths are not limited to oil fields or subglacial lakes. What is guarded is the power to define knowledge. Whoever decides what Antarctica is, a sterile icebox, a resource vault, a cosmic mirror, also shapes how humanity understands Earth. Across the ages, the continent has reflected our deepest obsessions. Long before anyone set eyes on it, Greek and Chinese geographers imagined Terra Australis Incognita, a southern land to balance the world. It was a metaphysical need, not a measurement. Later in the age of exploration, Antarctica became a proving ground. The race between Amundsen and Scott, the near miracles of Shackleton, triumph and tragedy inscribed on a white stage. Those stories revealed something humbling. No matter our machines, humans remain small against endless wind. The 20th century cast a different shadow. Rumors of covert stations, blocked air lanes, and secret tests transformed the ice into a strategic token. The 1959 treaty declared peace in science, but also created a buffer where silence could masquerade as stability. Even here at the planet's edge, geopolitics traced its familiar lines. Today, the mirror reflects fierce survival. Calving shelves rising, seas rivers flowing in darkness under ice, each revelation tolls like a bell. Antarctica is no longer only the library of Earth's past. It is a clock for our future, and always it reminds us of limits. After generations of inquiry, we have only brushed the surface. Beneath miles of ice lies a biosphere apart lakes that never met the sky, microbes, unlike any others, and bedrock scars that could rewrite origin stories. Every answer opens another question, as if the continent insists on staying a step ahead. Yet its deepest lesson may concern not nature, but truth. Science lights part of it and veils part of it. The military protects and restricts. Religion interprets and sanctifies quiet. The braid of these three makes Antarctica a knot of knowledge and authority no blade can cleanly sever. Perhaps that is why Antarctica is more than a place. It is the last emblem of the unknowable. It is simultaneously near-charted imaged and ringed by satellites and distant like a neighboring planet. It is described in precise terms, yet cloaked in fog, secrecy, and myth. And maybe what the ice teaches is not what lies beneath, but how we meet the unknown. It asks for humility. It suggests that not every secret must be forced open. It hints that silence can sometimes be wisdom. We end without definitive answers, and perhaps that is the point. The absence of answers is the engine of wonder. Antarctica does not hand us certainty. It hands us questions. It does not fill the quiet. It reflects us back to ourselves. In a world that never stops talking, the South remains still. Maybe that stillness is its message. Antarctica, the Earth's final secret, waits, not for conquest, but for attention, for listening, for the acceptance that some corners of the world and of our own nature resist possession.